Good evening, I'm Cynthia Ng. This is AWANI Tonight. Government enforces price ceilings and export bans, but will they solve the food problem? More on that coming up. Transport Minister Datuk Sri Wee Ka Siong has issued a stern reminder to e-hailing players that the ministry will not hesitate to suspend or revoke their licenses if they are found exceeding the maximum 200% surcharge limit. The public has complained of price hikes on e-hailing apps in recent weeks, especially during peak hours. On Tuesday, we explained that the main reasons for the price increases were due to fewer drivers on the road to accept a sharp increase in demand from passengers. Meanwhile, some e-hailing companies have seen their number of registered drivers drop by over 30% compared to pre-pandemic times. While the base fee for e-hailing fares are not regulated by Putrajaya, the surcharge cannot be more than twice the base fee amount. Price ceilings and export bans are a recipe for inflation and food insecurity. According to Centre for Market Education CEO Carmelo Ferlito, these measures imposed by the government to tame inflation will only delay the problem. He explains why.
We are basically taking away profit opportunities from suppliers, and this is a negative incentive for the supply to step up. And if these suppliers try to make a abroad, then we put an export ban on it. So with these two measures, basically we are avoiding to get what we want, that is more supply. So potentially what we can get after this is that some suppliers cease operations. So we can even observe unemployment in the industry, but for sure we don't get the additional supply that we need, and prices will remain tense toward the high level. In the moment in which the ceilings are removed, then prices will get high again because the supply has not stepped up.
On top of that, he said the government should commit to policies to liberalize international trade, such as the move to drop approved permits AP for food import.
If we cannot cope domestically with certain production, then we can have an easier access to foreign products. This is a way to try to cool down prices. But again, the problem is with price ceilings, then probably importers don't want to import because they don't see profit opportunities there. So that advantage that you could gain with the removal of the APs is basically nullified by the price ceilings. As more as we allow the market to do its job, then the faster the suppliers will meet the demand and prices will cool down again. So it is as simple as that. Allow the market to do its job, avoid the populistic temptations, and on the other side, pursue the way that you have indicated with the AP's removal. So open to true and effective free trade.
The lack of chicken supply has led to some traders selling above the set ceiling price, but it can still be bought for as low as 6 ringgit 99 cents per kg in the market. A survey by Bernama found that most traders sold whole chickens at 8 ringgit 90 cents per kg as set by the government.
As of Tuesday, the standard whole chicken was sold for between 6 ringgit 99 cents and 9 ringgit 50 cents per kilogram in the capital city. In Ipoh Perak, a survey found the price of standard chicken increased to 9 ringgit 30 cents per kilogram compared to the usual 8 ringgit 30 cents per kilogram. While in Selangor, a survey in several locations found that chickens were sold for up to 10 ringgit 50 cents per kilogram. Daily price update of chickens can be obtained via the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Price Catcher application.
Malaysia needs to prioritize environmental, social and governance (ESG) practices in the implementation of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework it is part of. Petronas President and Group CEO Datuk Tengku Muhammad Taufik said this would allow countries to be better prepared in facing economic risks.
the very things that we are proposing right now that we would be put under a microscope for. ESG. Everybody thinks about dealing with emissions front and center, but there's, of course, the society and also the governance that you need to deal with. And I think this offered a pathway. We saw this very early on, at least in Petronas level, having to deal with emissions, having to deal with labor standards, having to allow for competition. We see this, we anticipate it, and we have to prepare for it.
He was speaking at the World Economic Forum, WEF, in Davos, Switzerland. On Monday, US President Joe Biden announced the 13 participating countries in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. In addition to Malaysia and the US, other countries joining the initiative are Australia, India, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Singapore, Brunei, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand and Vietnam. Former Health Minister Dato Sri Dr. Adam Baba will cooperate in the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission's probe into allegations of corruption in COVID-19 related procurement. According to him, in times of pandemic, many procurement processes were done without going through normal procedures, and there was also confusion in implementing the matter. He said that the government used emergency procurement because there was an urgent need for many things to be done quickly. Since it was the first time such a provision was used recently, Dr. Adam said that he is willing to give his full cooperation to the MACC throughout their investigations. On Tuesday, MACC Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Azam Baki said that the agency was conducting an investigation into the alleged corruption, malpractice and abuse of power in COVID-19 related procurement. We'll continue after the break. Stay with us.
Jualan Riang Raya Maxis. Bawa pulang peranti idaman baharu hanya RM50 sebulan dengan Maxis Home Fiber hari ini. Melindungi anda dan seisi keluarga dalam ruang tertutup. Panasonic.
Kemungkinan tanpa had menanti apabila anda dikuasakan oleh jalur lebar Unify Home. Selami emosi dan rasai keterujaannya. Dengan Unify Mobile, setiap detik pasti tidak akan terlepas. Serta kongsi kegembiraan dengan mereka yang amat bermakna. Nikmati 100,000 jam hiburan pilihan anda. Unify duniamu bila-bila masa di mana-mana sahaja. Unify.
Welcome back. Over to developments in the United States. At least 19 children and 2 teachers were killed after a gunman stormed an elementary school in Texas and opened fire in the classroom. The 18-year-old gunman, identified as Salvador Ramos, was killed when police tried to arrest him. The shooting took place in Uvalde, a small community near the Mexican border, at approximately 11:30 a.m. The tragedy marks the deadliest school shooting in nearly a decade, since 26 children and adults were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012. It is also at least the 30th shooting case at schools in the United States this year. The shocking act of violence has once again prompted calls for greater gun control in the country. Gun laws in Texas are among the least restrictive in the country. There is no minimum age to possess firearms under the state law. US President Joe Biden delivered an emotional call for new restrictions on firearms following yet another school mass shooting. He urged Americans to stand up to the politically powerful gun lobby, which he blamed for blocking enactment of tougher firearms safety laws.
What struck me was these kinds of mass shootings rarely happen anywhere else in the world. Why? They have mental health problems. They have domestic disputes in other countries. They have people who are lost. But these kinds of mass shootings never happen with the kind of frequency they happen in America. Why? Where in God's name is our backbone to have the courage to deal with it and stand up to the lobbies? It's time to turn this pain into action for every parent, for every citizen in this country. We have to make it clear to every elected official in this country. It's time to act.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping told UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet that China doesn't need lectures on how to treat its citizens. Bachelet's trip is being overshadowed by fresh allegations of abuses against the Uyghur minority group in Xinjiang. Her controversial trip is also being criticized as a public relations tool by the Chinese Communist Party. During a video call with Bachelet, Xi defended China's human rights record, saying each nation should be allowed to find its own path based on its particular circumstances. He also criticized countries that lecture others on human rights and politicize the issue. China is facing new accusations that it was sanctioning abuses of the Uyghurs following the release of thousands of leaked documents and photographs from inside prison-like facilities in Xinjiang. Sri Lanka's new Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was sworn in as Finance Minister today. He will head the government's bailout talks with the International Monetary Fund (IMF) as the island nation faces its worst economic crisis in decades. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa named Wickremesinghe Minister of Finance, Economic Stability and National Policies. He aims to present an interim budget within 6 weeks, where he is expected to slash infrastructure projects to reroute funds into relief programs. The five-time Prime Minister was reappointed to the job 2 weeks following the resignation of Rajapaksa's brother Mahinda. Sri Lanka is facing severe economic crisis with record levels inflation and shortages of fuel, food and medical supplies. The government recently announced that it will hire 2 international firms to restructure its $51 billion external debt. As the region emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic, economic recovery and progress must be anchored in a new social contract that focuses on inclusivity. A United Nations report warns the problems of poverty and inequality will worsen if there are no adequate measures to protect the vulnerable from future shocks.
Of course, informal workers have been the most affected. About 820 million informal workers in the region have been affected. And this region is also known to have 65% of the workforce works in the informal sector. And one of the other reasons why they were most severely affected, because being a part of the informal worker means you have no access to social security, healthcare, so those kind of basic things that you really needed at this time. And the other people who got affected a lot more were women. Partly because women have actually normally tend to work in these contact intensive sectors like hospitality and tourism and all these kind of things, which have not yet recovered. But also during the pandemic, during school closures, when family were getting sick, women were the ones who were taking time off from work and spending time with their families.
The report also found that women are most heavily affected by the pandemic, yet little is being done in the region to address their woes.
Countries have launched various policy measures along the economic and social protection and labor market dimensions. Yet, when you look at them, out of 523 measures that were introduced, only 97 of them, which makes it only 18% of them, were gender specific or gender sensitive. So what do you mean by gender sensitive? Any social protection or labor market measures, they're going to be gender sensitive if they benefit women's economic security amid notable, job losses and income losses, or address unprecedented amount of work that they have to do, unpaid work to take care of people at home.
Over 85 million people in Asia and the Pacific had already been pushed back into extreme poverty in 2021 due to the pandemic. Sweta urged governments to lay the foundations to protect future earning potential of vulnerable groups and overall productivity growth.
the job training, lifelong learning, vocational education, and labor market intermediation need to be significantly strengthened to help those negatively affected by such fast changing technology and job market. So key idea here is to help become more productive again and escape this poverty inequality trap through their own effort. People can do it rather than being dependent always on social welfare and transfers that would never be adequate to address the inequality challenge alone.
A report by Pusat Kommas found politicians guilty of using racial rhetoric while campaigning in Malacca. Will we see more of the same in GE15? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to our guests about the latest Malaysia Racial Discrimination Report that's coming up right after this. That's all we have for you on AWANI tonight. I'm Cynthia and thank you for watching.